Adamataha Kunjabihari Rama Kunjabihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivadadadi Gopi Janavalabha Girivadadadi Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnuvad Paramahams Parivraja Acharya Ashtottaras Srimad Divine Grace Jai Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Antara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki and Jai Gaura Premanand. All glories to the Assembled Devotees. All glories to the Assembled Devotees. All glories to the Assembled Devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing Srimad Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 17, Mother Parvati curses King Chitraketu, Text 9. Shri Shuk Uvacha Bhagavan Pitachritva Rahasya Gatadir Nrpa Tushnim Bhabhuva Sadasi Sabhyascha Tad Anuvrataha Shri Shuka Uvacha Bhagavan Pitachritva Prahasya Gadhadir Nrpa Tunshnim Bhabhuva Sadasi Sabhyascha Tadanuvrataha Shri Shuka Uvacha Bhagavan Pitachritva Prahasya Gadhadir Nrpa Tushnim Bhabhuva Sadasi Sabhyascha Tadanuvrata Sishk Uvacha Bhagavan Pitachritva Shri Shuka Uvacha Bhagavana Pichachrutva Shri Shuka Uvacha. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, Bhagavan, Lord Shiva, Api, also, that, Shrutva, hearing, Prahasya, smiling, Agadha, dear, whose intelligence is unfathomed, Nripa, O king, Tushnim, silent, Babuva, remained, Sadasi, in the assembly, Sabhya, everyone assembled there, Cha, and Tat Anuvrata, followed Lord Shiva, remained silent. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Srila Shukadev Goswami continued, My dear king, after hearing Chitraketu's statement, Lord Shiva, the most powerful personality whose knowledge is fathomless, simply smiled and remained silent, and all the members of the assembly followed the Lord by not saying anything. Purport. Chitraketu's purpose in criticizing Lord Shiva is somewhat mysterious and cannot be understood by a common man. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, however, has made the following observations. Lord Shiva, being the most exalted Vaishnava and one of the most powerful demigods, is able to do anything he desires. Although he is externally exhibiting the behavior of a common man and not following etiquette, such actions cannot diminish his exalted position. The difficulty is that a common man, seeing Lord Shiva's behavior, might follow his example, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 3:21. Yadyadacharati shreshtas tattat deva tarojana sayat pramanam kurute lokastadanuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. A common man might also criticize Lord Shiva, like Daksha, who suffered the consequences for his criticism. King Chitraketu desired that Lord Shiva cease this external behavior so that others might be saved from criticizing him and thus becoming offenders. If one thinks that Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the only perfect personality, whereas the demigods, even such demigods as Lord Shiva, are inclined to improper social affairs, he is an offender. Considering all this, King Chitraketu was somewhat harsh in his behavior with Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, who is always deep in knowledge, could understand Chitraketu's purpose, and therefore he was not at all angry. Rather, he simply smiled and remained silent. The members of the assembly surrounding Lord Shiva could also understand Chitraketu's purpose. Consequently, following the behavior of Lord Shiva, they did not protest. Instead, following their master, they remained silent. If the members of the assembly thought that Chitraketu had blasphemed Lord Shiva, they would have certainly left at once, blocking their ears with their hands. We're just going to do one more text, if that's permissible. Just it's very much connected. So I'll read. I'm going beyond my quota. Okay, so this continues. Text 10. Translation. Not knowing the prowess of Lord Shiva and Parvati, Chitraketu strongly criticized them. His statements were not at all pleasing, and therefore the goddess Parvati, being very angry, spoke as follows to Chitraketu, who thought himself better than Lord Shiva in controlling the senses. Purport. Although Chitraketu never meant to insult Lord Shiva, he should not have criticized the Lord, even though the Lord was transgressing social customs. It is said, Tejiya sam doshaya. One who is very powerful should be understood to be faultless. For example, one should not find faults with the sun, although it evaporates urine from the street. The most powerful cannot be criticized by an ordinary man or even by a great personality. Chitraketu should have known that Lord Shiva, although sitting in that way, was not to be criticized. The difficulty was that Chitraketu, having become a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, Sankarshan, was somewhat proud at having achieved Lord Sankarshan's favor, and therefore thought that he could now criticize anyone, even Lord Shiva. This kind of pride in a devotee is never tolerated. A Vaishnava should always remain very humble and meek, and offer respect to others. Trinadapi sunichena, tadorapi sahishnuna, amanina manadena, kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. A Vaishnava should not try to minimize anyone else's position. It is better to remain humble and meek and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. The word nirjatambhinamine indicates that Chitraketu thought himself a better controller of the senses than Lord Shiva, although actually he was not. Because of all these considerations, Mother Parvati was somewhat angry at Chitraketu. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanan Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Translation, text 10 repeated. Not knowing the prowess of Lord Shiva and Parvati, Chitraketu strongly criticized them. His statements were not at all pleasing, and therefore the goddess Parvati, being very angry, spoke as follows to Chitraketu, who thought himself better than Lord Shiva in controlling the senses. Hare Krishna. So, these texts are very connected because we're seeing, on the one hand, Lord Shiva, he's displaying all of the symptoms of a great devotee, even in spite of being, it says here, harshly criticized in front of assembly of his followers and his wife. He simply smiles. He remains completely detached from the situation. So that is, as we were describing this glory of Lord Shiva, he sets the religious principles for all human beings, and here he is acting in such a matter. And then we're also hearing how the risk or the danger that even in devotional life, that upon receiving mercy from the Lord, that sometimes pride can develop. And in the case of Chitraketu, although he was good friends with Lord Shiva, there was some, it's mentioned here, some small tinge of pride, thinking that having achieved the favor of Lord Sankarshan, that he could criticize someone, even Lord Shiva. And the purport is basically mentioning how pride is the enemy of everyone. Pride is the enemy of the aspiring devotee. And Lord Chaitanya has specifically given a formula which is meant to be remembered by all devotees throughout the course of their progress in devotional life. So we may analyze a few of these points. The development of pride happens sometimes, my spiritual master will say, when there's these two things. There are pious results, the results of pious activity, and then there's an impure heart. So when there is some result of some pious activity, one is blessed with some facility, some ability, some skill, some type of benediction is given by the Lord. And when that is used by an individual who is not pure in their heart, pure in their desire, and transparent, to be able to perceive that that is a gift from Krishna, then pride comes. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, Bhumir apo nalovayu kammano buddhirevacha ahankarati ame bina prakriti ashtada. That actually the mind, the intelligence, even the body is distinct from the soul. So the root of pride is when the soul identifies with some type of material situation that he's been given from the Lord. It's just like if there was when I was in school, I was young, and my family was not rich, but wealthy enough to maintain ourselves quite comfortably. But the area where I grew up, it was a very, very wealthy neighborhood. So compared to my neighbors, my friends had these massive houses. So once I would go to my friend's house, and I had sufficient clothing and everything, but he had some really nice stuff. He had this really nice jacket, this really nice Nike jacket. It was white. It was a white jacket, really good winter coat. And so I borrowed it from him, and then I was wearing that jacket. So if someone is to think, now this belongs to me, this is mine. Now I'm so proud of this. Look at how nice this is. I'm wearing it. I'm showing it off. And then the friend says, "Okay, give it back now." And then you go back to your old jacket. So that's what happens, that we are given some gifts from Krishna, and then we may become proud of those. We may think, this is due to my ability, this is my prowess, bodily, mental, intellectual. But the soul, we have to understand the position of the soul is so minute, right? Only a few lifetimes ago, perhaps that soul was in the body of a lizard, and he didn't have such a powerful body or such a developed mind or intelligence. So like that, the material nature is simply awarding the living entity these different facilities based on his karma and his desire. So the removal of pride entails coming to that humble position of who I really am as a spiritual being. A similar example could be given, like, a child, if a child's father has a really nice car, like a hot rod, big engine, and the son drives it to school one day, and all the friends are, wow, look at that car. And so that example is given like the body is like the vehicle, and the soul is the passenger. So when the father asks for that car back, and the son was thinking it was his, it's going to be a rude awakening to understand the true humble position. And this is what happens when there is pride, that Krishna cannot tolerate the pride in the devotee. It said here, though, the difficulty was that Chitraketu, having become a great devotee of Lord Vishnu's Sankarshan, was somewhat proud at having achieved Lord Sankarshan's favor, and therefore thought that he could not criticize anyone. This kind of pride in the devotee is never tolerated. So we see examples of this in the Shastra, of devotees of Krishna. If there's a little tinge of pride, for example, in the case of the gopis, they became proud of their position. The most intimate servants of Krishna, the greatest fortune they had experienced. A little pride came, and Krishna immediately disappeared. That was Krishna's mercy to curb that pride, because Krishna doesn't like to see pride in the devotee. It's like described as like a bad smell. If we come up to Kishori, and imagine there's just a terrible odor, like the bathroom or something. And Krishna, Hari, yeah, there's my devotee. Thank you for. But it keeps Krishna away from being able to bestow that mercy. He wants to see the pure and clean heart. So the question is, the verse is given here, Trinadapi sunichena, tarorapi sahishnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. So why is it that humility is required to chant the holy name of the Lord, or holy name of the Lord constantly? What is it that humility does that, because this is what Lord Chaitanya is saying, that only if one's in the position, then they can chant the holy name constantly. So our goal is constant chanting. So why is humility so essential to do that? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Yeah. It makes us realize our insignificant position. Okay. Anyone else? Yes. puts us in our true position as a servant.
No, but nobody else shoots. I'm grateful. If we're not humble, then instead of meditating on the names of the Lord, we'll be meditating on what someone did to us. So we can't properly chant the name, and Japa will be like going over and over what they did to us instead of thinking about the Lord. So that's why it's important to be humble.
Jai. Anyone else? Girish Prabhu? Okay, yeah. Anyone else? These are all correct answers. It's very interesting to understand the sequence of events when humility is not there. That, as Jai Baladev was mentioning, that rather than being in that natural position of full dependence on Krishna and shelter and service, then the mind actually will take shelter somewhere else. If humility is not there. Some incident happens. Ultimately, some offense will be there because one will be agitated at another living entity, a jiva. And then that causes the mind to take shelter of the modes of material nature. So, in order to avoid that, one has to avoid that position of making an offense to someone else. One has to actually move beyond the nature of the mind. The mind is explained in Bhagavad Gita that it's the best friend or it's the worst enemy. So if our mind is controlled, if we're in that humble position, then the mind is in the mood of service, right? Service, being controlled by the intelligence, being controlled by the soul. But in the situation where there's not humility, something happens, the mind will take shelter of thoughts of anger, revenge, wanting to get back at someone. And it's not possible to chant at that time. The mind will not be able to go there. The mind is so absorbed in material energy at that time. So in this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains, as he's describing with Arjuna, the nature of the mind, how the mind is very difficult to curb. Arjuna, he's praying to Krishna, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna, pramati balavadudam tasyaham nigraham manye, vayor ivasu duskaram. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna. And to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. So the mind is really the problem, the uncontrolled mind. It's preventing us from being absorbed in this mood of service. And in order to really recognize that and develop kind of the humility that we desire, we have to analyze the mind very carefully when these situations come upon us. You know this book, Vaishnava K. So Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj has given instructions to the mind that in order to get free from the mind's contamination from pride, then one has to very carefully analyze what is the nature of this mind that I have. He prays, my dear mind, what kind of Vaishnava are you? Simply for false prestige and a material reputation, you sit in a solitary place and pretend to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. But this is all cheating. So the commentary here by Jayapataka Maharaj, she says, Srila Bhakti Santa Saraswati is taking the part of a conditioned soul, addressing his mind actually for instructing us on how to train our minds, because as conditioned souls we have dushtamana, or uncontrolled minds. The purpose of the yoga process is to control the mind. For one aspiring for self-realization, the controlled mind is the best friend, and the uncontrolled mind is the worst enemy. The question being asked to the mind is, my dear mind, what kind of Vaishnava are you? This is the process of weeding contaminations which have polluted the consciousness. So this is what happens, that subtly in the mind, some feeling of superiority or arrogance arises, and if it's not checked by a humble position, humble mood of service, then it dominates the consciousness. We become materially invested. So Lord Chaitanya says this verse Trinadapi should be strung like a necklace and worn at all times for constant remembrance. So many of us wear Tulsi Mala. But how often do we think of that we're wearing Tulsi Mala, right? Not often. So we have this prayer and it's there, we know we should be thinking about it, but unless we bring our attention to it, we tend to just forget it. It goes out the door, and our mind is again invested in material energy. So there's a few other very nice points in this. The next text, he says, such an ambition for a cheap reputation can be compared to the stool of a hog, because such popularity is another extension of the influence of Maya. And in that purport, it's described how that bhakti creeper develops, but sometimes unwanted creepers, such as creepers with desires for material enjoyment and liberation, grow along with the creeper. Such varieties are unlimited. And if one does not distinguish between the bhakti lata creeper and other creepers, the sprinkling of water, this nourishment, is misused, because the other creepers are nourished, while the bhakti lata is curtailed. So all of the sadhana that we're doing, if we're not very careful that it's watering the seed of devotion, it will water so many other things. And this is really the biggest obstacle in devotional life, is that we come, and in the beginning we're very humble, we don't know very much. At some point, Krishna mercifully may endow us with some small ability, and then pride starts developing. And that pride is actually what's preventing us from, as Nityananda Prabhu mentioned, attaining that position of a genuine servant. A real servant is not proud. He can't. If he's very proud, he can't be a good servant. To be a servant means you have to become humble. So the more humble humility that's developed, and feelings of actually of worthlessness, that in one sense, it's explained by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that a devotee on the topmost platform always humbly thinks he's not rendering any devotional service. He thinks that he is poor in devotional service and his body is material. In Kalyana Kalpatru, he says, if I think I am a Vaishnava, I shall look forward to receiving respect from others. If the desire for fame and reputation pollutes my heart, certainly I shall go to hell. By giving others the remnants of my food, I shall consider myself superior and shall be burned with the weight of false pride. Therefore, always remaining your surrendered disciple, I shall not accept worship from anyone. And Krishnadas Kaviraj says, whenever there is a relationship of love of Godhead, its natural symptom is that the devotee does not think himself a devotee. Instead, he always thinks he has not even a drop of love for Krishna. So the ability to take shelter of Krishna and Krishna's lotus feet is by medium of the holy name. The holy name is how one reconnects to Krishna, to his position of devotional service. And unless this mood of humility is developed, then that only option, the only way, Kalo Nastyeva Nastyeva Nastyeva, that only opportunity to reconnect with Krishna is taken from us, stolen from us by our mind, our contaminated mind, our identification with that which we're not. And it's important that we understand actually how bhakti comes is through the Lord's devotees. So this is such a great risk that when there's pride, the respect for devotees goes down. The opportunity to receive any type of mercy from Krishna is coming through his devotees. So it's cutting off the complete access to the internal potency of the Lord's devotees and the holy name. And this humility, the more humble position that we can develop, that will draw more mercy from the Lord. He'll become pleased simply by that purity and sincerity. That's really what Krishna's looking for in our devotional service. And in this nice Jagannath Astakam that we chant around Rath Yatra time, it says that Lord Jagannath bestows his mercy upon those who feel themselves fallen. So what kind of great person are we? We're in the material world. We've fallen down from the spiritual world, from Krishna's association. We left Krishna. But, the mind will, very expertly neglect all of those points and manage to find some way that it can still feel elevated. So these are important principles to help curb that, as we saw in King Chitraketu, that was not tolerated by the Lord, and he was cursed by Parvati. And Lord Shiva was displaying this proper mood of complete humility, not being agitated by any situation. So the purport is also mentioning this point that Vaishnavas should not try to minimize anyone else's position. It is better to remain humble and meek and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. This is also what's mentioned here in the purport to that Bhagavad Gita verse. Prabhupada says, such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance in all humility. The method prescribed is Savaimana Krishna Padaravindayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. So there are many, techniques and instructions and philosophy that we can try to apply, but it really comes down to this mood of dependence on Krishna. Prabhupada is saying the only method for controlling the mind is chanting Hare Krishna with all humility. So we can try so many techniques and things, but it really comes down to just accepting our insignificance, our dependent position, and then when we chant in that mood, then Krishna will take care of everything. Krishna will control his own energies, the mind, all these things, and he will bestow his mercy upon one who very sincerely calls out, chants in that type of mood. So I think I'll pause there for now. I may have gone too much covering the second text, so I apologize for that. I think kind of threw me off a little bit about this sequence, but if anyone would like to share anything about this topic, that would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, Jai Baladev.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the class. Very nice class. One point that Daita Prabhu made, a really good point yesterday, is that we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all become proud. It shouldn't kind of, deject us from devotional service. And sometimes pride is sometimes inspired by the Lord, as we can see in some of these pastimes. And so the one point he made is that we make mistakes, but if our motive is not, like vengeance or it's not an offense, we make mistakes, So in this regard, there was one experience that I had regarding my brother. Since I grew up with him, it's like we have a more casual relationship than maybe he has with other devotees naturally. And so I remember I was going to a college program. I was rushing, and then something I needed to get from his room, but his room was pretty crowded, with some devotees. But so I opened the door, went in. I was thinking maybe I should offer my obeisances, but I'm like, it's kind of crowded. And so then I was like, nah, I'm kind of rushing, so I don't need to. And so then I asked him whatever I needed, like a key or whatever. So then I grabbed the key and, ran out, whatever. And it was no hard intentions. He's my brother, I have no, trying to disrespect him. So anyways, a couple of seconds later, up on in the hallway, I was walking, talking to some devotees. Then, boom! I broke the bulb that's exposed on the thing, and so then a light bulb went off, literally and figuratively. I was like, okay, it's proper etiquette. If that was someone else, then I will offer my obeisances regardless. But since it's my brother, it's casual. So there was no necessarily offense. I wasn't trying to get him back or disrespect him, but that was the last time I didn't offer my obeisances when I walked into his room. So incidents like this, we often feel that, we have to humble someone, but we forget that Krishna's the supreme controller. He'll humble us in many instances, just like Terrence and me too. Working in the kitchen, you get humbled a lot. You think a proud thought, you'll get cut immediately, or it's something to spill on you. So a lot of times, if our intention is right, it's not offensive, we make mistakes, of course, and Krishna will humble us. But if our intention is to get revenge or do a crusade against a devotee or something, he'll humiliate us maybe in a very not so nice way. And so I think this is one of the essential points that Daisen made, is that we make mistakes. It's okay. We shouldn't be dejected, but we shouldn't be offensive in our mentality. So that's all I have to say in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a lot of Krishna's pastimes where he's killing demons, and they're indicating these different obstacles in the nartas that are really based on pride. They're all kind of based on that misconception. So bringing our consciousness to very carefully monitor that, and control that, and as we mentioned, by simply the holy name has all the potency to relieve us from that. But if we forget, this formula, and we invest consciousness in the material energy, the mind and intelligence, we come to that point, right? There's like that juncture point where you still have that option. You can take shelter of Krishna in the holy name, take the humble position, or the material energy is kind of pushing you, take this. So we recognize more and more how Maya, she's standing behind Krishna. She's like in the shadow. As soon as, if we turn away from Krishna for a little bit, automatically by recourse, that means we're in that shadow, we're in Maya. So those juncture points is when we really, that's our working point. That's when we really have to do whatever it takes to take that higher step and that higher ground. And that's what devotional service, the process is learning how to do that more and more. So thank you for that. Anyone else like to share anything on this topic? Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Class was about pride. Oh, you're doing pretty good. Thanks, Ru, for the discussion and touching on this topic. Following up from yesterday. So my question is, as you mentioned, it's quite clear the medicine, the best antidote for this illness is chanting Hare Krishna, and all devotees under the shelter of Srila Prabhupada are taking a vow to chant minimum 16 rounds. Just wanting to hear what your thoughts are on this minimum point. Generally, because of the nature of Lord Chaitanya's movement and also Srila Prabhupada's own personal mood and his spiritual master's mood, there is a strong emphasis on outreach. So sometimes, devotees will really plan their time in such a way that they can chant their rounds in a very efficient way, and then move on to other services that are more directly, we could say, visibly connected to our outreach. But I wonder, anyway, it seems one could make some arguments that increasing our japa would also be a very effective method of increasing our potency in terms of outreach. And anyway, we do say minimum 16 rounds. So anyway, what are your thoughts on
that? Yeah, it's a misconception that we have, that our external, what we're doing externally is measurable. Our devotional consciousness is measured by what we do externally. Rather, the purpose of the services that we're doing is to develop taste for the holy name. The purpose of the practical, so-called practical, is to develop a taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna. The Shravanam and Kirtanam is the engine that will actually bring us back to Krishna, that attraction for the messages of Krishna. So I think in the beginning, because the senses are uncontrolled, then one doesn't have qualification to chant so much. We can hardly get through 16 rounds. We don't have much taste for hearing and chanting. So it's natural, and that Prabhupada recognized that. Therefore, he gave engagements to the devotees. He said, you work in this way, you do it for Krishna, you'll become purified. But ultimately, the purification is developing a taste for the holy name. So that shouldn't be neglected. And sometimes we see that it is neglected. It's because of lack of, I would venture to say, understanding of the abhideya, the process. Sometimes Indra Prabhu would say that the activities are given because one doesn't have the taste. That really, if we could just chant Hare Krishna with taste, that's the best engagement. The holy name is everything. It's the highest form of service. So we're not there yet, and we take strength, we take inspiration from engaging in the mission, Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual master. That is also service to the holy name, and that will increase our taste for chanting. So each individual has to find that balance where I'm getting nourishment, but the really test is the taste for the name. So for some devotees, they may be able to chant more, and they should do that. But they may find that if they start dedicating time beyond what is perhaps their level of adhikar, then they'll start feeling diminished in their chanting. They won't have potency, they won't have taste for hearing and chanting. So it's a careful balance that's different for each individual. But yeah, ultimately, taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna is how Krishna consciousness develops. It's hard to be thinking of Krishna, when one's engaging in, like, for example, on book distribution. It's really tough. So therefore, one has to have a very strong sadhana, so that you're out there, on the battlefield, and then you come back and can really get absorbed in the pastimes. But if we're not, making these efforts or taking these risks, then our hearing and chanting, it may not have the same taste. We may not be so attracted, and it may become hackneyed. So those are a few thoughts. Anything anyone else would like to share?
One devotee, I think, they were building a new temple or something, and this devotee was like doing physical service. I think for the 24 hours, 22 hours or something, and then a couple of hours he had for sleep. So he went and told Prabhupada, I'm not able to chant my rounds because I'm helping in building this temple or something. And Prabhupada said, good, you're doing service. Don't sleep, but chant. That was one pastime of Prabhupada where he insisted that no matter what, you have to chant. And there was another example, maybe when he was in Vrindavan or somewhere, there was this disciple of his who was like 24 hours chanting, and once all his disciples were told, he's an amazing devotee, all day he's chanting, Prabhupada, he has real taste for chanting. So Prabhupada said, how much service does he do? And they said, the whole day he's chanting. And Prabhupada, then that's all, what did he say? Yeah, he said that's all a show. It's not that he has a taste for chanting. Yeah, then he said, if you're calling out to Srimati Radharani for service the whole day, and if you don't do any physical service, then how can that have a taste for chanting? That's not so. Both ways. So, like the point he made, there has to be a balance. It shouldn't be, either only service and neglect your chanting, and it shouldn't be only chanting and neglecting service. There should be a balance. And personally, maybe some devotees may have already experienced, the more you take your attention to chanting, it's natural that Srimati Radharani gives you more service. And when you accept those service in that mood that, this is Mahaprasad of Srimati Radharani, and you do it with that mood, naturally your taste for chanting increases, and both ways. And what you'll notice is your 24-hour actually expands. It's very mystical how it happens. It just expands. And then you'll notice that you can chant. Basically, what happens is Krishna or Srimati Radharani, by her mercy, she gives you the intelligence of how not to waste your time and get those pockets, where in the past you must have not realized, like, oh, I could chant now. Just 1, 2, 1, 2 rounds here, there, and you'll realize that actually you can chant about 8 to 16 rounds extra in a day. We have one Mataji in our Pujari department. Her schedule is super hectic. Like, she's at home and she serves Kishori, but minimally she chants 32 rounds every day. How she does that? She preaches, she does phone classes, she has deities at home, she's serving her family. She comes every day to the temple and gives about 4 hours, of her time, and she still can chant 32 rounds. One nice quality, like, she's very in that mood because the gravity comes when you chant. So naturally, you start, wasting time. And Krishna also expands your day. That's a very mystical experience. Devotees have told they've experienced that. Krishna makes, if we have a sincere desire, he gives us time both for chanting and for service. So we don't have to compromise on either.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment anything or ask any questions about this topic? It's important.
Not on this topic, but on the verse. It's more of an etiquette point. Here it says, Bhagavan apita trutva prahasya agada dhir tushnim. He was quiet. He didn't say anything in response. And interestingly, the sages also did not say anything. The sages are taking cue from Lord Shiva. If he didn't say, I shouldn't say. Otherwise, the sages would then make the fault of I'm speaking and Lord Shiva did not speak. It's a subtle, fine. Himangi likes to use the word cultural. It's an etiquette point that in an assembly, if our seniors don't say, we don't say. And if we say, then we should be careful. There's a Prabhupada pastime like that. Prabhupada was, I forget the details of it, some reporter was asking and Prabhupada was giving one heavy answer. And one of the devotees standing next to Prabhupada said, no, what he means is something. And Prabhupada cut him down. No, that's not what I mean. I mean this. And he still kept the heavy answer. So it is called speaking out of... and this whole thing is about the art of knowing where to speak, when to speak, how much to speak, and when not to speak at all. And that's not easy. Because one of the, like, who was speaking here, the toads, the other, Paramakaruna, that it is that Vacha Vega which causes all problems. In case of Chitraketu, his problem was caused because of Vacha Vega. He said, which was not, what he said was unintentional. In that sense, he's not faulted for it. What he said was unnecessary. That's the problem. Unintentional is all right. Unnecessary. And Parvati Devi is very particular. So she curses him. That's a
Yeah, I was thinking it's like sometimes if maybe a devotee does something or says something, and someone laughs, but a little too loud. It just kind of comes out, and there's a tinge of, maybe something else. But yeah, the etiquette point, it is interesting because this last line of the purport is very, I notice a lot of times Prabhupada, the last line of his purports has like it's like a strong punch. It's really nice. So he says, they did not protest. Instead, following their master, they remained silent. If the members of the assembly thought that Chitraketu had blasphemed Lord Shiva, they would certainly have left at once, blocking their ears with their hands. So if it were to be an offense, then they would be obliged to either leave or, like in the case of Krishna at the Rajasuya, when Shishupal was blaspheming him, I think the members they started saying, no, So in that case, because it was a blasphemy, they were obliged to respond or overcome that. But in the case where it wasn't an offense, if they had been to react, like you're saying, that would have been an obstacle on their path. And yeah, it's really. I read Prabhupada has written very strongly about that point. I forget what it's called. Maybe like I don't know. I forget the name, but it's actually an offense when one speaks before a superior. And Prabhupada says Krishna never tolerates that, because it's an offense actually to that devotee. And we know that Vaishnava Aparad will obstruct. So I forget the location, but I just read Prabhupada's really heavy about that one should always be on guard against that. So thank you for that, Prabhu. Anything else I want to share? Okay, a few more. Yeah, Renee.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. It's been a really good class. But on the chanting, like what's a good like strategy, I guess, to like maybe build up your how much you can chant.
Well, a general technique that we hear is you try to fix something that you can do on a regular basis. If you can chant 4 rounds, but you can do it every day, start with that. Don't go beyond what you can, because then there'll be a tendency to miss other days. So fix somewhere where you can, and then progressively try to increase that. Now, as far as getting more taste, in your chanting, are there techniques for that? There's like external and internal things. Obviously, putting yourself in a situation where there's a lot going on, or a time outside of the morning, is going to make chanting much more difficult. And then internally, there's so many techniques or strategies as far as how to approach the holy name. So because you're just, you're still new, you're learning all these things. And we're all new, we're all learning these things. But ultimately, this respect for the holy name, and that the holy name should be chanted with great reverence, respect. Even in kirtan, sometimes we're just chanting. We don't even know what we're doing. We're just yelling the Mahamantra. But we have to understand that Mahamantra is the sound incarnation of God. So if God walks in the door, you don't just, you don't either yell at him or you don't do nothing, but with great respect. Every time we chant, we can take that mood that this is actually, and if that consciousness develops of respect for the holy name, that's what will increase the ability to chant and actually perceive what the holy name actually is. So even sometimes we're just casually chanting, or we're chanting, talking to someone, or doing kirtan and thinking, just spacing out, or but the holy name is ultimately the holy name will reveal the spiritual world. It's the means by which we become Krishna conscious. So the holy name is at the root of all of our progress in devotional life, and that you can offer prayers to the holy name, and you serve the holy name. There's one purport where Prabhupada says, if one carries out their services as service to the holy name, like any book distribution or preaching, whatever you're doing, if you do that in the mood of serving the holy name, you'll also feel ecstatic in chanting. Because that's really what the Krishna conscious movement is. It's for spreading the chanting of the holy name. That's Mahaprabhu's formula. So understanding more and more, this is a big point, we understand more and more what we're actually doing. In Krishna consciousness, we're doing so many things. We jump in the temple, but gradually we understand what I'm actually doing. And more consciousness comes into the gravity, the importance, the significance, the realization of what is actually, the depth of what actually is going on and the opportunities that we have. And that's also fostered by things like etiquette and culture. Everything is meant to facilitate that. So we should take those rituals more to heart, that this is meant to awaken a type of consciousness. Those are some thoughts on that.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Yes.
Usually there are different devotees will say there are 4 P's to follow. The first is preparation. So it's a long list, but we simply put 2 things on in terms of preparation. Is one is it is said that one should be actually anxious and eagerly looking forward to chanting the next day. That's one. And the second is get to bed early. That's the best preparation. Get to bed early. Get to bed early. The later in the night, the worse it is for chanting the next day, honestly. So, whatever we need to do in our life to get to bed early, that would be the perfect strategy. Okay. So, that's preparation. The second P is called, actually, in now when we have the beads in our hand, Acarya Nistha mentioned prayer. You pray to Krishna to attract us because we are attracted by other things. He has put forward his material energy, and she is very attractive. But we want to be attracted to him. Prayer. Other prayers also, but primarily prayer. Then is posture, sitting properly and chanting. Because without posture, we might fall asleep, and if we fall asleep, then our time, the 16 rounds, do take away 24 hours. And the final is pronunciation, to pronounce the syllables carefully. And if we don't pronounce carefully, if we don't chant like that, like, oh, I'm paying attention to the holy name, then that taste, the appreciation for it will not come. Then we'll be in the, I need to get this done, versus I need to chant Krishna's, I'm in Krishna's association. So those are 4 things, and they all work together. It's not different compartments. And as practicing devotees, we try to make these 4, we improve on these 4s day by day. And there are some days where we ate too much, we slept too much, or slept very late. But that's the struggle of a devotee. And with these 4, and in general, a strategy, your strategy specifically question was how to get to chanting more. So Acharya Nishta's answer was take a minimum that you can do every day and do it. And the way I guess we were encouraged, and it seemed to have worked in our case and other cases as well, is have a plan such that every holy day, like an appearance of a particular avatar or an Ekadashi, whatever, you increase by 1 or 2 rounds. Because those days also help chanting. There's potency in those days, and we're able to sustain. And whatever that step is, do it in guidance from another devotee who can say, hey, that's too big a step. Or, come on, that's too little. You can take another step like that. That's a strategy. I'm sure they have a strategy.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
Preparation, prayer, pronunciation, posture, and prasadam, of course.
And I'll add one more P, which is pastimes. Actually hearing the Lord's activities is described as the Swarup Shakti of the holy name. Because the name Krishna, it's Krishna. What is Krishna? Krishna is always doing some activity, some pastime. So it's not different. So just reading Krishna book, we have to hear who Krishna is. Otherwise we're chanting this name, we don't know who that person is. It's really helpful, very important. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. My comments are based on a lecture I was mentioning the other day by Radhanath Maharaj regarding this pastime. The theme is kind of like why Krishna, in a sense, inspires people to be proud, to teach certain lessons. Like he gave the example of Indra. And normally in the course of our Krishna consciousness, we become proud and we think, let me enlighten others, I want to enlighten people. But then Krishna will use you to enlighten others of what not to do. And so Radhanath Maharaj is making this very nice point that, we chant, Prahlad's names because he's doing everything he's supposed to do, or we chant other glories. But Indra, he's very glorious also because he's tasted position numerous times in the Bhagavatam of what not to do. So he's also enlightening everyone what not to do. And sometimes in the course of our Christian consciousness, it would be kind of like boring if everyone was humble all the time. Like young Christian lights competition, And it doesn't mean that we have to be offensive. He kind of inspires people to make mistakes, to teach certain lessons, in enlightening people on both sides of the coin. And so I kind of want to verify that, not speculation. Can I read a couple of things in this regard? Is that possible? It's only take like a minute. Huh? Oh, okay. So I came across a quote, and I want to verify so you won't think I'm speculating. Anyway. Sorry, I'm kind of disorganized. Harmonies. So I don't know. I have a book of quotes, and I kind of try to, look at for lessons regarding Vedic stuff. And there's one quote by this guy's named Lawrence A. Kipton. He says, "Much of truth is found upon the battlefield of controversy, and it is kept alive by sharp exchanges." And so there's a similar verse I remember my brother would always quote to the devotees in this regard in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 2.1 through 17. It says, "A sincere student should not neglect the discussions of such conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus one mind becomes attached to Sri Krishna." And if you want to kind of verify this point in the Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhav, I'm not going to read there's a couple of paragraphs, I'm not going to read it, but it's a very nice article I read a long time ago that I never forgot. It's in volume 3 of the Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhav, chapter 5. Basically, he says that the truth is propagated both positively and negatively, and it's propagated even more magnanimously by the method of negative opposition, like Hiranyakashipu, propagates the glories of Lord Nrsimhadev by the method of negative propagation. So these battles, kind of are kind of inspired by Krishna, because if everyone was just peace and harmony, it'd be so boring. But he teaches us
in
certain
that
lessons.
context, Bhaktisiddhanta is referring to preaching against material life. That's one technique. You offer the glories of devotional life, but you also have to smash the misconception of material life. So it's obviously related.
Yeah.
But I think that's what he's referring to.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thanks for your comments. And thank you, everyone, for your participation. It's really nice having these discussions in the class. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Boga Seva ki.
That's what I thought. because two syllables and they're the same. When you
Yeah.
sleep, you might as well say